Mahalo. Mr. Bill Stormont, Project Director. And supporting this effort is Mr. Lloyd Unibasami as well as Pua Enaan. We also have some advisors that are support of this big effort. This is a huge lift. This is so important. Clearly, the community is very interested and passionate about how we care for Mauna Kea and how we balance the various activities. So we have folks traveling from different parts of the island who act as advisors to this effort. So we have, who do we have? Starting off is Chris in the back over there. We have April, Heather, and Lala, Mary, Corinne, Jessica, Paul, and Dusty. We bring all the people because we want to make sure that we are totally ready for all of you and we can show up well. Okay, so I'm going to ask Chair Komeiji to say a little bit more, elaborate upon who the authority is and how you folks came to be.
Mahalo. I wanted to kind of explain a little bit about the history about how the members were selected. The legislature, when they created the Mauna Kea Authority, intentionally created slots for people with differing perspectives. They wanted to ensure that the people that got appointed were not all slanted one way. So we have people that are cultural practitioners, we have lineal descendants that are cultural practitioners, we have a representative of the observatories, we have a representative of the University of Hawaii, a representative of DLNR. I am a representative of business. We have a representative that is really well steeped in water. And so the whole point of creating this authority is to create a platform where differing viewpoints can be brought together and we can have the discussion that the mayor talked about in a safe place where we can talk about the hard issues without being antagonistic to each other. And as the mayor said, we're getting along very, very well. We recognize that we have different perspectives, and yet we're able to work together and try to achieve the goal of finding our next path. So last thing I want to say is, again, I want to echo what everybody else said. We know that we can only do this and be successful if we communicate with all of you. We know that we need to be transparent. We know that we need to receive your input. And so the reason that we're going around the island is for all of those reasons, to answer your questions, to explain a little bit about what we do, but most importantly, to understand what your feelings are. You guys don't know it, but we're gonna engage you guys directly in gaining your input. So again, thank you for taking your valuable time and coming in and sharing your input with us. Mahalo.
Mahalo nui. I'm gonna call up, I call her Auntie Doctor Noi Noi, and she's going to talk through the overall context of the authority and start to bring us into the strategic, draft strategic framework. What I wanna say up front is that we will have about 40 minutes for your time to share input, to provide feedback on the draft framework. And then we're gonna end with about 20 minutes for Q&A, for which all the authority members will be present to receive your questions and to respond, okay? And so what I wanna say very straight up, straight out of the gate, is that tonight's conversation, when we get to the part where it's 40 minutes of your time to provide feedback and input, it is not to provide yet specific recommendations for management actions, for operational actions. However, what it is that you're gonna help to shape the navigational system that embeds and codifies the values so that this authority and this body can help to create a system for making decisions as we move forward. Thank you, Auntie.
Aloha mai kako. Aloha everybody. I'm so happy to see very familiar faces here in the audience. So thank you, as was mentioned earlier, for coming and spending a little bit of time with us this evening. you were introduced to the members of our authority, and many of them I hope you recognize or you're familiar with. I want to emphasize what was said a little bit earlier. This whole framework is actually wrapped around community, and that's why this is such an important piece of what we're doing, and we will continue to do it to make sure that any discussion or decisions that are made in the authority framework is not just ideas that come from 11 or 12 members, but actually is because we represent our community and you are part of that community. So that's really important. But one of the things I wanted to share with you is how we got here, and I'm going to give you the real short version. Because as you remember, many of you remember, there was a lot of conflict up on Mauna Kea that began decades ago, culminated in both 2015, and that was the year I think Lanakila in his youth ran up to the summit of the mountain, something I'm not sure he can do again, so hopefully he doesn't have to. And then in 2019, when many of us assembled back on the mountain because we were absolutely determined that we did not want one project to proceed. Out of that conflict, which pretty much stopped Hawaii and the business of Hawaii in its tracks, came a desire to find a new way to do business. And it maybe took that kind of stand in order to get government and the powers that be to stop and listen to us. But out of that came a bold move by the legislature. Representative or Speaker Scott Psyche was Speaker at the time. He created the Mauna Kea Working Group, and he did that in 2022, I believe, and then gave us the charge. There were 4 of us who now sit on the authority, but there were 14 of us in that Mauna Kea Working Group, and he gave us a charge to come up with a plan and what that plan would look like that could be introduced to the legislature. So out of that 6-month intense action, which Dr. Pualani, Auntie Pualani Kanakaole participated with us, and that she ground us in our cultural understanding of what Mauna means to us and what the Aina means to us. Not just Hawaiians, but all of us who live here, and this is how we live on this island. The legislature in their wisdom came up with Act 255, which created this authority. Is it a perfect piece of legislation? No, absolutely not. But it's far better than standing on the sidewalk or on the road with a protest sign. When you can see that this authority made up of 11 do moving forward. So, Auntie Pua.
Hello, Yakahoa Pao. It's a real honor to talk about Kanawai because it's not something we hear about all the time, but it's something that existed for a long time, and it's something that continues to exist because it has to do with this land that we live on, and what we as Hawaiians anyway, should know about this land that we live on. That's what the Kanawais are all about. Kanawai is first and foremost, is called a law, but it's like a code or a decree or a regulation. Any one of those will identify the idea of Kanawai. And the first Kanawai that we're going to talk about is a Kanawai called Ho'okiki Kanawai. Ho'okiki Kanawai. Okay, and Ho'okiki Kanawai is the law of continuum. And so this is about Kanakas, trying to educate Kanakas about what's happening on their land and how they can make their land exist for many generations. So this Kanawai has to do with the law of continuum. And Ho'okiki Kanawai is allow it to flow. And then the idea of water that flows, Mauna Kea, the Aupua of Ka'ohe, runs from Hamakua, and it's a small outwalk, runs from Hamakua to the top of Mauna Kea and over to Mauna Loa. Kaohe is bamboo. And the idea of the bamboo and why it's called bamboo, it has to do with water. And between the two mountains catches the most water. And it catches the most water, and this water will go into the earth, go into a bamboo idea of water basins. And then the water will leak out from it very slowly. And so you have all of these water basins between the two mountains. And that's why we have really big rivers in the Hamakua district, because of all the water that flows down freely. So the consciousness of what flows, where it flows, why we should be conscious of it flows, because it gives us life and because it gives us a place to live. And water is what we need for life. And a lot of the water has to do with the two mountains that we live on. Yeah. That's the idea of the continuum. The other kanawai is kua'a kanawai. Kua'a is the burning back, the law of the burning back. Now, the law of the burning back has to do with the gestating of landscape, basically, gestating of landscape. You know, they initially looked at it as, or compared it to an ali'i of very, very high rank. You don't approach the ali'i of very high rank because he is out of reach of everybody. It's the same thing with these land areas, the landscape that we need to hold sacred, or we need to hold like they're going to do a lot of good for us, because these are the land areas that are necessary for our existence. One is, of course, the volcano, and is one of it. The other is places that have marshes and streams and rivers and coral heads and the idea of the wet forest, because all of these things help to reproduce what's in there on the land. Coral head lets things out into the ocean, and a lot of fish go for it. Okay. And the wet forest is what gives life to more forests. Okay. And the streams do the same thing. And so this is the idea of the law of the burning back. So you look for these places and you be sure that you allow these places to maintain itself as it is. The other kanawai is kaiokia kanawai. Kaiokia kanawai is the law of natural boundaries. Now, this is a law that we as Kanakas need to be aware of. Okay, the law of natural bodies is the law where all of these things that I just talked about, the volcano, the movement of water, and all of that, where they are moving. And what it's saying is that you have to recognize the boundary. So what this is saying, know the boundaries. Know your boundary as a Kanaka and know the boundaries of the land. So Kanawai is all about the environment, all about the land and what the land is doing and where the land is and how the land provides for us. And therefore, our idea of being conscious of it and staying away from places that is not good for us. Okay, the last kanawai is ki hoi hoi kanawai. And ki hoi hoi kanawai is the law of regeneration. And so the law of regeneration is that it's like the first law is the law of continuum. We need to continue our own generation of Kanakas. And we need to see that the generation of the native trees continue. We need to see that the generation of the native birds continue, or the generations of the insects that live in these areas continue, because they're the food for the birds. Okay. And so we have to be conscious of all of that as natives of the island. And again, these are the 4 laws of the land. And the law of regeneration is that we go out and there is a sense of reciprocation. And the sense of reciprocation is if you go back to the Kumulipo in the first 2 lines, I was going to say this in with the first Kanawai, but I didn't. But with this particular line, the first 2 lines of the Kumulipo, Okeawi kahuli vela kahonua. And when you talk about that, people say, oh, that's when our earth is hot. No, it's talking about the lava. When the lava is hot, it makes our earth hot. Okeawi kahuli lole kalani. And what that does when our earth gets hot like that, and a lot of steam is coming up, it clouds the sky. Okeawi kukayaka kala, it hides the sun. So what it's doing is it's returning water to the space above and turning it into clouds. And eventually, what that does is that cloud system will return the water back to us. So there's the whole idea of kiho'iho'i kanabai is the idea of reciprocation, that we give and the land gives back. And so be conscious of the fact that the land does give back.
Give her a nice round of applause. I'm sure somewhere she can hear you. So you can tell I'm the newest appointed member of the authority because when it came to who would follow Auntie Pua, they chose me. But I thoroughly enjoy listening to that every time we have one of these meetings. It's so educational and inspirational, and we keep showing it because for an audience like you, we hope that it inspires your thought. So it adds to the richness of the mana'o that you will share with us tonight. I was talking to Bob Nishimoto before that. He says, yeah, Auntie Pua is going to talk about cycles, and it's so cool and deep. And if anybody would understand that, it's a community like Hamakua, which has such a rich agricultural heritage. You know cycles, you know seasons. Everything has a season, right? And there's a time for things to happen. And that's what she's talking about. And so we deeply appreciate that you're here tonight, because this is the season of preparation. This is not the season to enjoy the fruits of the harvest. This is the hard yards. This is the time you prepare for what's to come. And so thank you for making that sacrifice to be here and not be the one at the end who either enjoys the feast or complains about it, but you're part of making it. And that is something we'll deeply appreciate. From farming too, it's not a one-day event, a one-time event. There's the planting, and there's the caretaking, and then there's a harvest, and so forth. One of the thoughts we had, and the reason we've set this whole framework of presentation up, is this is not the first time people in Hamakua have talked about the mauna. It has been talked about. And we wanted to demonstrate through the capturing of the working group's report, through the capturing of the legislation, that we're listening, that we're trying to capture what you have said in the past and about what is important. We're here tonight, as Mahina said, to talk about our intention. What do we want this mala to grow? What will it look like? What is it to feed? What is it to do? What are the planning guidelines for this? And then later we're going to come back another time, and we're going to come back and talk about how we do this, how we execute this plan for all of the activities on the mauna. Now, taking it from agriculture to our work, it's once we have a strategic framework and the guidance of how we value the mauna and what it is to be and how we express that in kind of a large, high-level strategy, then we have to come back and figure out and ask you about where does astronomy fit in that? Where does education fit in that? Where does natural resource management fit in that? Where does cultural resource management fit in that? Water resource management, commercial activity. All these things then have to be put into a context where they're in alignment with that overall vision. We ready for it? Because I think you're here. We're going to set those intentions tonight. There's questions you're going to be anxious to get down the next stage. But I want to talk about education. I want to talk about water, and so forth. We ask you to be patient with us, and let's do things in our season, and let's set that intention tonight, and we'll come back and talk about those issues later. Mahalo nui. And John's going to talk a little bit more about how we now segue into you and get hearing from you.
So thank you, Neil. When you look at this draft framework, in its current state, it's probably about 5 months old, okay? It was drafted by the 12 board members to get to agreement on what the initial draft would look like. This is not an easy task. Early on, you heard about how diverse that authority membership is among the 12 members. Imagine 12 people with their 12 hands on the pen trying to write something in common. It was a facilitated process that resulted in this current draft. What will be asked of you later is to look at this, what's missing, what's not clear, what should be added. Once we complete the Around the Island series of community meetings, that input collectively will be presented to the authority members to bring this document to its final form, probably sometime around the fourth quarter of this year. Okay, but I want to go back and touch on something Auntie Pua did by asking you to open this document. If you look at the bottom left-hand side, number 4 of the core values are the 4 kanawai she's talking about. The inside right flap at the top are the 4 kanawai that are there, okay? For the authority members to include the 4 kanawai as a core value in how we move forward, in my mind, is somewhat unprecedented, okay? Because this set of natural laws that come to us ancestrally through Hawaiian knowledge and Hawaiian wisdom is now going to have to line up with a regulatory framework by which we manage our lands, our resources, and all of that. I have not heard of a project that started out trying to merge what amounts to being 2 very different paradigms, 2 very different worldviews, and 2 very different ways of approaching the development of our natural resources in a sacred mauna going forward. About 30 years ago, I was part of a group that went into Waipio Valley to try and help the taro farmers at that time get long-term leases from the primary landowner, Bishop Museum. It was really contentious, a lot of conflict, and those of us that do not live in the valley understood clearly that we were foreigners. And when we went in there, it altered the way we would approach things, stop talking, listen, all of that. And I can remember one trip, a young man saying to me, "Hey, John, you see here Lave Falls? You see that arching curve of the water? That's Waipio Valley, the curving water." Oh, okay. A couple weeks later, I'm in there with a young woman, and we're standing on a promontory looking at the stream making its way to the ocean. And she notices the stream has got this curve in it. And she says to me, "John, you see that flowing water curving? That's Waipio Valley. That's Waipio." Okay. A couple months later, I go back, this time with Auntie Pua, because the Edith Kanakaole Foundation wanted a lease to open a cultural center there. And Pua and I are standing there, and she says, "Hey, John, you see the clouds? You see the rain? You see the waterfall? You see the stream? You see the water going in the ocean? You understand evaporation? That circular motion, that natural cycle of life, is Waipio. That's the curving water, okay? In that moment, what she did for me was she made the invisible visible. And it brought about a whole new consciousness about the way we look at things. That for me is an example of the challenges and the great opportunities that lay ahead when we get this implemented correctly. And I cannot thank you enough for being here tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so as promised, I feels like we have enough ingredients to really have a thorough conversation, the first of hopefully many to come. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna break up into two groups. So the last two tables are going to stay where you are. And I'm gonna ask these two tables if we can just go across this way and go on this side, okay? Jessica is going to, Kaneakua, my kako'o, is going to facilitate on this side of the room. So these two tables right here, the first two tables, if you could kindly join Jessica on this side of the room, and then I am gonna come to the folks over here, okay? I also want to encourage you folks to take a 3-minute break, grab some coffee, grab some water, grab some very ono pastries from Papa'aloa Bakery. Restrooms are here on this side, and we'll meet you in your designated area in about 3 minutes. Mahalo. Any additional questions? Like, bring it over there. And then you're gonna have.
Aloha mai to our folks joining the meeting online. Mahalo nui for joining us. We'd love to engage you. The folks in the room right now are discussing what's not understandable in the draft strategic framework. If you have any mana'o on that, please feel free to drop that in the chat. Mahalo nui.
Here is the first question that I'm asking you folks online and then those who are here in Laupahoehoe Cafeteria Public Charter School. So looking at the draft framework, what stands out? What is not understandable and why? Yeah, please. Yep, I'm gonna.
Core value number 3, holomua oi kela kela. I apologize, I'm not a native speaker, so I hope I was close. It's very conceptual to me, and I would prefer to have like something a little more concrete and tangible to help me understand it.
I second that.
And I appreciate this kind of specific feedback. It's useful. At first glance, what is not understandable? And those online, please go ahead and add comments into the YouTube chat, and we're also monitoring that as well.
My question is, what is the summit region? How do you define that? Where is the boundary?
So, clarifying question, is the question, you want to know the project area, the bounds of the project area?
I'd like to add to that because if I don't go use the mountain, if I fish, do I have a stake in this process? In other words, it doesn't, it defines the mountain, but it doesn't, the ending, but where does it end? You know?
And on that effort, we could have a map to define those boundaries so we can actually physically see something along the lines of what Heather said, something a little more concrete.
Okay, so the way that I'm noting that is an appended map. Yes, go ahead.
To me, I don't look at it as a map, more like a cycle, like they said. You know, I envision the water cycle as Dr. Kanaokle talked about. You know, to me, I looked at it there rather than a linear. It's more like the circular. Yeah.
Something that is I don't see in here that I'm intellectually curious about is one, the methodology that was used to get to this stage where you have the draft. So, you know, you're talking about it was a facilitated process with some very different viewpoints. So I'd be curious to know a little bit more about how that process was engaged in to get to the digest that is here. And then similarly, the comment was made that we're trying to reconcile two very different paradigms, you know, the Kanawai paradigm, and then, you know, I don't know what you want to call it, but the democratic lawmaking process, right? What are the group's thoughts about how they might reconcile those two paradigms to implement what ultimately the draft proposes?
Thank you. Heather went ahead to the second question. So, no, not at all. That's a good question. I notated it. Can you please repeat the second question that you put forward?
The second question was the comment being made that there are two different paradigms coming here that need to be reconciled ultimately for the implementation. The sort of traditional way of knowing, the Kanawai, and then the American law system. And, you know, I think about it in my role, you know, I'm trying to reconcile traditional ways of land management versus the planning code, right? And so what I would be curious about is how this group plans to bring those two together in order to implement the proposed framework.
Thank you. That's understandable. And as a clarifying question, are you recommending or feeling that what is not either understandable or missing is you want or do you want there to, or is it more you want there to be an acknowledgement that this process is seeking to reconcile between two distinct knowledge systems?
I would be interested in a description of how the group proposed to address that issue. So basically a framework of a strategy, I guess, of how you would propose to go about resolving those two different approaches. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yes, and then to add to that, are we a part of that strategy to?
Or not are we, how will we be?
Yeah, to reconcile the two. Are we a part of?
Can you please say who is the we?
Well, the we is Kama'aina, or the we is. I think that Heather said it better. And I paraphrased it by saying Hawaiian versus business, Hawaiian cultural values versus the county code.
Hawaiian land management versus So maybe to summarize would be Western constructs of land ownership and management versus Hawaiian constructs and management of land. And how to find a pathway forward between those two.
So while you have the mic, I want to also encourage folks who have not yet shared to also chime in here. It's not understandable. Anyone else on this side?
No, it's just, I don't like starting a meeting with a question. I feel that that's kind of like, that's steering us already. So I find it interesting, but more so, you know, I understand that those processes were used for different types of activities that would get an end result that didn't benefit the people that were, I guess, it was trying to affect that particular community. I don't like questions starting off. I'd prefer the growing up here, I remember the types of activities that used to go on there. The kinds of things that people would make money from, and most of them, the activities up there was tours. I remember tours, Uncle Richard guys, that was way back, you know, 60s. And but most of the kinds of activities was hunting, hiking, camping. Remember getting many of us, people were gathering medicines from up there. Essentially, I didn't see too much people doing any kind of like spiritual activities. Only because we was kids, and that was the spooky people, you know, like, because that's the ones that when we broke a bone, we didn't need to go to the hospital like the way we do now. They would apply green paste, some la'i and bandage. Next day it was done. That's the spooky people.
The medicine people. They were the good people.
So,
that was when you were kids. They were scary. Yeah?
again, the activities, right? And then I see, right, there's this, you know, beautiful pictures of what's outside of Earth. And, you know, I do have concerns about, you know, us getting hit by some big bird flying towards us. What are we going to do about that? You know, I'd like to know where can we have dialogue on that? You know, so there's those astronomy does pictures, and they sell the pictures, and they study them, the sky, and how far something is. They see all these UFOs, and nobody want to say, oh, yeah, they're real. I'm like, well, what is that? And we don't build any of those things that run. We don't build that. I want to talk about that.
So access is the question. How will the public receive information from astronomical activities? So all the activities taking place in, with some of the astronomy partners and organizations that are on Mauna Kea. Is that the question you're wanting?
Well, I wouldn't formulate it that way. I would formulate it where on an educational viewpoint, like that should be an open book. Whatever is going on up there, you're up there. I use my tax-paying money to give you funding to put it up there. I want to know what's out there. Like, don't hold anything back. And then, I'd like to know what kinds of activities are going to be allowed, because that's the only activities I know that's been happening up there: tours, astronomy, education, hunting, hiking, camping, medicine. That's the only activities I know that we've been doing up there. Has there been any other activities?
Good one. So I've captured quite a few questions from you. So the last question was, what are all the types of activities that are being conducted, that are taking place upon the project area, upon Mauna Kea? Okay, I'm gonna check. Is there anyone else that wants to respond to this question before we move on to the next? Okay, going to the next one. Okay.
Before you move it, can I take a picture?
Sure, of course. Yeah.
If I could get my camera to cooperate.
Mahalo. Of course. Okay, so we started already. What else? What is missing from this draft strategic framework? And we can pull some of the stuff that you have already talked about in the previous question. What is missing? Why? So what you folks have already said is description of the methodology. Like, how did you develop this? What was the methodology to generate this draft, essentially? And then what is going to be the proposed framework to inform the strategy to reconcile these two constructs? And there may be more than two constructs, yeah?
I don't need the mic. But what the boundaries are, again, on this page is what is missing. The boundaries are missing.
Boundaries are missing.
And a map of those boundaries. What represents Mauna Kea and what we are talking about.
And maybe with the maps, perhaps it can be, there's so much GIS technology now, they can really locate the concentration of activities, yeah, that's taking place.
That would be great.
Yeah.
There's no more tours of Brazil, right? There is? There still is.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry. I haven't been up since the protests. I have not been to the Mauna, and I used to go constantly. But after that, I kind of have a little.
Okay, what else? What else is missing from this draft? Any thoughts? You can also, again, write it on a Post-it, and I can read it out loud for you.
I got one.
Okay, great.
How does the authority reconcile misinformation and often deliberate misleading facts online with the reality of the actions of the authority, the limitations of its authority, because we talk about boundaries, there are defined boundaries. And you know, this is like a guiding principle, right? It's not a comprehensive roadmap. It's like state of Hawaii, it doesn't show every street and lane. And so that is available and it's there, but how does the authority, you know, meet those two, that intersection? As in state representative, I constantly battle that, you know, the chemtrails, the cloud seeding, the all of it. It goes on and on and on, and some of it is like very minor. You know, some of it is just simply a misinterpretation, right? Tourism on the mountain, well, it's actually a pretty tightly managed thing that pays like a bulk of the money outside of the state. And now that some of the telescopes are leaving, like there's a lot less money all of a sudden, and the federal government has cut back a lot of funding and there's a lot less. So like those are those, like, again, back to Councilmember Kimball's, like that modern constructs of like, we have this knowledge from the past, and Native Hawaiians have, the Kanawai have more of an ecological continuum. They thought of things in the natural cycles, some short, some long, and I think they were amazing, you know, observations, and they mirror what I know through Western science. I'm not Hawaiian, obviously, but get them, Kaza. Yeah, that's the tough. How are you guys gonna go against that? How does that get balanced?
Yeah, thank you. I think, Chair.
Clarify one thing about the boundaries, because I want everybody to go off on a tangent. Mauna Kea Authority does not have responsibility, has not been given responsibility for the entire mountain. The only part of the mountain that we've been given responsibility for is something called the Scientific Reserve, which is at the top. We're also given responsibility for the mid-level facility, which includes Laupahoehoe, which is sort of a dormitory for the astronomers and the visitor center. And then we have easement on one of the roads that we've been given responsibility for. So so that you guys will spin on this issue, sometimes we have responsibilities for one half of the road, and on the other half of the road, the responsibility is with DLNR. Sometimes we have responsibility for this part of it, and then Hawaiian Homes. So the mountain itself is divided into, so our responsibility, although much of what we say kind of encompasses, man cannot divide, but the way the law was established, there are these kind of boundaries in terms of what, so we are the Scientific Reserve, Laupahoehoe, which is the mid-level facility, and an easement on the road. Okay.
It'd be so nice to see that right now. I mean, from a bird's eye view, I'm sure if we went Google, we could find it, right?
The whole-
Scientific, the kind.
Yeah.
And then,
On your website.
This is just the broad.
Yeah, we have
and
a
it's so broad right now. What you just said was compelling because the misinformation is out there. And how do you even know what is misinformation and the difference between what is misinformation and the real information? So is there a website that says, this is all the real information?
Perfect. So that's another piece of input. So a one-stop shop kind of website.
A lot of people use Rumble on YouTube for their misinformation. I get a lot of those sent to me.
For the misinformation?
Rumble.com, yeah.
It
They're a popular site.
This is kind of tangential to what you guys are talking about with the misinformation, but I'm not sure if this should be an additional guiding principle or an inclusion on the commitment to community engagement. But as I read the language right now, it seems kind of unidirectional, like you're getting input from the community, which is important, like, yes, yay. But then I think there's also an opportunity, I don't know who said it about this being like an example of how things could be done differently. So it could be a teaching moment too. So a component of this that's about education, about a different way of approaching things, and using it as a demonstration, I think is, it's not called out here as an opportunity.
So what's missing is a call out that this is an opportunity to have different kinds of conversations and to produce different kinds of results. Is that right? Yes. Thank you.
I just think about how many people aren't familiar with the Kanawai concept, right? And so this is an opportunity to share out that framework. So, yeah.
Anything else on this question? Yeah, please. I'm going to write while I'm listening.
Just a quick thought that I had was, we were talking about merging different paradigms, two different paradigms through this process. And then later on jumped into a conversation about boundaries and maps. And it just made me think, Auntie Pua, when she's talking, the Kanawai don't respect man-made boundaries. And so I think that while there is, for all practical purposes, a need to map out the project site, I think there should also be an acknowledgement that things that happen on top of the summit also impact things down Mackay too. So. Yeah, just like the influence of what happens up Mauka also impacts. Just thinking about natural resources and
history that used those natural histories in the past and how it affected down here.
absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Ahupua'a.
I think this same applies to sort of the designation of the kuleana. Like, this is ours, this is DLNR's, this is DHHL's. I mean, that is all, again, a construct that is not reflected in how the Kanawai would approach this situation, where it would be kuleana for everyone within the Ahupua'a, for example. So these two things, the land designation in terms of mapping it out, as well as whose responsibility applies where, are two of the paradigm issues that I think are just conflicting right now and need to be addressed. And I think it'd be really cool if we figured out a way to do that.
Well, and have an overlay of, from when you did the map, like saying DLNR's responsibility, whatever the other responsibilities are around, even, like you said, though there are none in, Old Hawaii.
Well,
It was
DLNR
all-
has like natural area reserves,
I know,
has
they-
hunting areas,
Exactly.
forestry areas.
Mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the birds don't care.
No.
No.
Kalila don't care where the lines are.
Neither do
Definitely
the
the
damn
sheep
sheep.
don't care.
Damn sheep don't.
Yes. This is really rich conversation. Wonderful. Anything else? Anything else that you can really help us to get really specific on? What's missing?
Since I'm retired now, I'm not responsible to rulemaking or anything like that. So made it quite clear.
Careful, they might pick you up.
No. But I have an opportunity to think from ecological perspective. Yeah, once you do that, it's irresponsible. I understand your responsibility and your responsibility and responsibility. So I have the good fortune of being retired to think from an ecological perspective. This is what the Kanawai is so important to me, because it's always been a guidance. It's a guidance light, and I've crossed boundaries with different agencies. Agencies tend to operate in silos. Even simple things like, where is the high tide mark? What about a cliff slide on Hamakua? Who's responsible? Oh, I don't know. Call a state or vice versa. So I personally think I could understand where you're coming from with rulemaking. But I think if the guiding light is this, what Dr. Kanokoli said about it's a cycle. If you look at from this thing with water vapor and the streams and the connectivity, once you break that, everything falls apart regardless. So if that is the guidance, then I think the details will be how do you go to public meetings and all those stuff. So I understand your dilemma. So when you're retired, you can think like me freely and be responsible.
Retired once at least. You're like Lucille.
Being irresponsible.
Continuous retiring guy.
You are. Next thing you know, you wake up and you job.
Yeah. You got another one.
My only job is to kill guinea grass.
That's full time. That is full time.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Nishimoto. So how I'm capturing that is provide more specific guidance or language on how this authority will maybe measure ecological function or productivity or disruption over time. Yes. Awesome. So let's move on to the final question. It's a little bit repetitive. We're saying it kind of in a different way. Is there any section or language in the strategic framework draft that does not belong, or why? Or is there something like, I'll say it again, a big section of the framework that's missing? Yes, maps. Yes, boundary areas. Yes.
Well, I'm going to just say the obvious. I want more Hawaiian.
Okay. Hawaiian language or?
More Hawaiian language, but I want it broken. I want there to be a definition attached.
Glossary.
Thank you.
You got it.
I want you to use exactly what Auntie said. I want you to use all the Hawaiian, every story, olelo, everything that came from the Mauna, just to let people know, sorry, how important it is again, and then give them a little English if they need it. So it comes with better understanding to certain people.
I'm just gonna pick up on the conversation that you folks were having around, you know, the need for the need for agencies and departments to strive to work together, right? Across county, state, federal, and there's also other private landowners, right? A mix of private landowners that buffer big part of Mauna Kea region. Yeah, yeah.
Just the entities that are a government thing.
Yes, yes. So my question is are you wanting more kind of like language or clarification on what the authority, how the authority will engage with other agencies and departments? I'm not trying to lead you. I'm just listening to the several comments that were made.
I think this goes back to kind of everybody's thoughts of defining things, right? And I think the defining MKSOA's boundaries will go a long way with that, because again, talking with like Bob, and you talk about the systems, then you tumble you're like right away into DLNR. Like Lake Waiau is right next to the science reserve. That's DLNR. You know, just like the science reserve is actually pretty small. It's like the very summit as the curvature starts to flatten out. And I think that'll help people understand what the authorities' responsibilities are. It better focuses your attention instead of like, I'm constantly thinking of the gorse and the, you know, overgrazing on the northern slopes, and, you know, that's not part of this conversation. It's not part of the conversation. And I think that'll go a long way, because I think just by the nature of it, without constructs, if you just tend to go everywhere.
Well, because people know the mountain and they don't know the boundaries.
That's what I mean.
So you're right. We need to have that delineated over and over and said over and over, because the people are gonna keep picking on, and what about that, and what about that? And it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't have anything to do with it, but
PTA.
very important.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And
No, I'm going to a different topic. Okay, if you're done, I'll talk. If not, okay. If I'm super picky, which I am sometimes because I write bills, restoration of natural resources section and significance of the Mauna section, the inclusion of the word resource. And on the back, we talk about natural resources, and then we talk about the Mauna as a unique cultural and scientific resource. I personally view the word resource as kind of having that extractive element and not having that reciprocal relationship so I would, instead of talking about restoration of natural resources, I would talk about restoration of the ecosystem. And instead of talking about a cultural and scientific resource, some other word, which I don't know in my brain, but that's, again, being super picky. About words have meaning, right?
Can you say more about why I got the replace, find a better word for resource because it connotes extraction.
Right.
But the other piece, like what do you want to achieve?
the reciprocal part?
To reinforce the idea that any interaction where there is going to be some taking in essence, there has to be some sort of reciprocation for that, right? So just highlighting that fact that it can't be a one-way transaction when you're interacting with any component of the Mauna. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a couple more minutes, like 2 more minutes for this.
This is the longest 7 minutes. It's been really good.
Oh, good. Oh, okay.
Definitely feeling the time distance quantum.
Any final comments? About 2 more minutes for this question.
Mauna Kea is one word or two?
Good question.
Great question.
Yes. I will.
We're using what's in the statute.
Yes.
Can I also say the statute?
That's a great.
It's not a statute, that's 2 words.
Can I also respond to that? On the back page, there's QR codes. In the furthest left QR code, Mauna Kea Working Group report, it talks about the fact that Mauna Kea has gone by several different spellings, which are all legitimate for the groups that use those spellings. So like Chair said, we got to follow what the statute says, but the working group report acknowledges that different groups of people have used different spellings for different reasons, multiple, many.
The university has adopted one word. So if it's any university product, you'll see it spelled as one word.
Oh, yeah, I've seen it just recently.
Center for Monetary Stewardship is one word.
Would shorten your acronym a lot. MKSOA.
That's a legislative matter we'll talk about later.
I just, Luna, right?
Yeah.
Luna had said up on the mountain, people do cultural practices and things like that. And it's very true, there's hunting and that's extraction and whatever. But the benefits from them goes over here, right? So it is a resource. We can't deny that it's a resource. And yes, there should be another word, kind of like advocacy as opposed to that other word. So we just want to say that if it's just scientific, if we're in this scientific circle, a boundary or whatever, you are gonna frame it as, Luna said we need transparency, meaning whatever you guys learn, we need to know right away. Well, hopefully that's what we're doing, right? But I don't know, I don't think it felt that way for years. So now, because we have this controversy, that's what's gotta come out of this. She said it, he said it.
The newspaper has good articles. What is it, every Friday?
Well, can I just add to what you just said? So I understand why it's not an open book, because people make money off of it. you know, whatever comes out of that activity that goes on for astronomy. So yeah, they're not gonna tell everything because they make money. Well, I'd like to know. I'd like to know everything that's out there. I'd like to know they make money, how? And who's gonna get that money? Because me as a taxpayer, I paid you to build that stuff for education, and how much that money will come back to us? If you're making how much money?
Okay.
Anyway, that's
Okay, and I'm gonna say, as far as the money goes, I wanna know who's gonna get the jobs, if there's jobs involved.
So workforce development section.
Like I've had two good friends who left here during the ha-ha-ha, and they didn't come back. And I like to see it be nice enough for everybody to come back and work at home, you know? I think a little bit, that's been going on a lot.
That's a good point. Workforce development section, and then continued more transparency, but being really specific on those contracts and contractors, how much is being spent and how much is being generated. Yep. So captured.
I want to know where their money is coming from.
So
Somebody's making money off of that.
So guess what, community? We met our objective. We did awesome. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to ask our authority members to go ahead and sit where maybe, or stand where Mr. DeFries is. And this is our time. We're going to transition into a Q&A portion. And those who are online, you can also submit your questions and comments online as well. Good job. High fives. Community members. Thank you. Please, go ahead. Any part of that.
Can I have the number 2 one?
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
forgot to
You
ask.
just gotta flip it, I think.
In the middle.
Is it now? Okay, got it. Okay. I think you folks should sit over here, right over here. Thank you.
We tried.
More in this way for the camera.
All right. Mike and Shazia. Right there for Mike. Come on. In front row. All right. Thank you, everybody. I think we had a really good session. We're open, not during this time, but after this, if you have suggestions about how we might improve just this process that we just went through, right? But we're open for any questions that you have, and we have, if you want to direct the question to general or to specific people, that's good. All right, I forget your name, sorry.
I got it. Luna, that's right. Okay, I'm going to ask Brother Rich the question. Okay, before I ask the question, Rich, how long you been in the astronomy? 30 years. Awesome. 31 years. Perfect. So how much money that telescope make?
Okay. Thank you for that question, Luna. I get asked that question a lot as the astronomy rep for MKSOA. I cannot remember the exact month, but I did a presentation. So all of our monthly meetings, public monthly meetings, first of all, open to the public. It's 10 a.m. the second Thursday of every month. We're typically in the DLNR building in Hilo. We have an agenda that gets posted about a week before the meetings. And that very specific question that you just asked was addressed in one of those meetings. So you can get the long version by going back. And I don't remember if it was June or July, but one of those monthly meetings I was asked to, June, I think, to present about that. So the first thing, and to give more context to your question, because you said as a taxpayer, the public provides funding for some of these observatories. So the observatories on Mauna Kea are funded by multiple sources, including international governments. So it could be taxpayers from a different country like Japan or whatever, right? That goes to pay for the operation of the facility, so the scientists from that constituent can use the telescope to do their research. So the money that comes in goes to pay for the operations on the mountain. There is no profit making. So for example, the telescope that I work for, WMKEC Observatory, is a 501c3 nonprofit. So we get, I'll just give it to you as an example, and then each observatory a little bit different because they have different partnerships. But for Keck Observatory, we get funding from the University of California, Caltech, and NASA, the bulk of the funding. That funding comes in to pay for the people that work at the observatory, that build technology and maintain the equipment to do the observations. The astronomers affiliated with those institutions of University of California, Caltech, have the opportunity and privilege of using the telescope because they belong to that institution that provides the funding. So to give you sort of maybe an analogy to think about it, if you're a medical researcher at the University of Hawaii and you need to use the lab to do your research, the University of Hawaii pays for the operational funding of that lab. So in that way, the observatories are kind of like labs for doing the research. It's not a money-making enterprise. There's nobody at the end of the line that is making a profit off of it. It's a research facility. And to your earlier question too, I didn't want to interrupt because you're giving input. The results of the research are open source, shared with the world. So the researcher, of course, they, and I'm not sure how it is for every observatory, I'll explain how it works for Keck. When they take their data, they need a little bit of time to do the analysis, so there's a proprietary period where the data is not shared, but after that proprietary period is done, which is somewhere between a year and a half, then the data is available to the whole world. So in the case of Keck, we have what's called an archive that anyone, including school children, can look up data that's taken at the telescope. The researchers publish their research in refereed science journals because they're doing, research and they want other scientists to see their research. That is all published open source to the public. And then but a lot of that is very detailed physics level. So in addition, the observatories in general invite scientists to share their research with the public in a more accessible way that's not full of jargon and so forth. So a lot of the observatories do that through publishing stories in the newspaper or having public speakers come. So hopefully that explains it, and happy to dive in and share more with you.
Yeah, so specifically.
Yeah.
So you need some mic. Put the observatory up there, yeah. And then
Yes.
You put the observatory up there, yeah?
Yeah.
And so all of the data is available to everybody, correct?
Yes. Yep.
But there's a time period where, okay, we gotta make sure no more any problems.
Yeah, well, the researcher gets the raw data. They need to analyze the data before they can conclude whether or not there's any validity to the
Right, and
to the
then
data.
and then they go ahead and make their notes.
Yep.
And
Publish
then,
a paper.
And then those notes become this catalog.
Yep.
Right? Because
Yep.
this catalog now, a lot of the other scientists, they rely on that data.
Yep.
Yeah?
Yep.
Because they're making these now the books, right?
Correct.
The publications,
Yep.
all of that, right?
Yep.
But that's the scientists, though. They're the one making the money when they put all of this data together, correct?
I guess
That's not you guys. You
That's
guys
right.
don't benefit from any of that,
We
right?
provide the facility to the scientists, and then they
Yeah.
share the data
Yeah.
with the world.
Yeah, but the money is being made outside of the data that you folks provided, correct?
I guess it pays for people's careers,
Mm-hmm.
so they make a salary by being a scientist and so forth. Yeah.
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 So a lot of the value of what us locals when donate, right? Because we donate to have that up there, and
Right.
it's still there, right?
Yeah.
We don't benefit from any of that.
So it's a good question, and thank you for the opportunity to explain. So the benefits are, so I want to be careful because we don't do it for the money, we do it for the knowledge. But in the process of creating the knowledge, we create economic benefit, we create educational opportunities for Keiki and for the public. We have many jobs, right, at the observatory. So the people who work at the observatories pay taxes. So all of this gets fed back into the economy, the jobs, the taxes, the educational benefits, and so forth. I think your question says that we have to do a better job of explaining those things. It's often a little bit difficult to explain those things because if I start with economics and people think we're doing it for the money, but we're really doing it for creating knowledge. So as long as it can be not a soundbite, but more of a discussion like this, and I think we can.
Mahalo for this this back and forth dialogue. I want to encourage if you maybe folks can meet each other after when we conclude our meeting
Be
and to
glad
have
to.
more of a one-on-one conversation.
Absolutely.
Just want to note that we only have about 7 to 8 minutes left for this Q&A period. So if we can try and divide the time between whoever has questions. Questions, anyone?
Hurry up before I ask the next one.
One quick question. Does anybody have a Tylenol? I've got a little bit of a headache. And not because of this meeting, but because of sitting in chairs all day. But to the point, just to add on this just a little bit, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that like the physics that came out of the astronomy field and information data there led us to having like the Wi-Fi on our phones and the cameras that we use and things like that. Is there any opportunity like going forward when these commercial enterprises that do use the data that comes from the telescopes to actually contribute from that end, because they are the ones that are actually maybe producing some revenue?
That's a good question. We're very academic based, so we're run by government and university kind of enterprises that don't necessarily look at that. We're super open source, so when we design things, we share it with everybody. When we get data, we share it with everybody. So we're not really focused on that. Yeah, but I think.
Are there like patents that you guys get funding from or anything like that?
For the things that we develop in-house at Keck and the universities and so forth, not really. I think because that's not our aim, right? Yeah. Oh, so yeah. So in terms of other economic benefits, the University of Hawaii, including Institute for Astronomy, UH Hilo and UH Manoa, and the engineering program is starting a space sciences and engineering initiative. And they've had success getting through the legislature funding for faculty positions, 10 faculty positions, 5 at the University of UH Manoa in the engineering and 5 at UH Hilo, to create pathways for students, and hopefully mostly local students, to enter into the engineering field, participate in some of the activities that we're doing, get involved in building of instrumentation, so that they get into these STEM fields and can eventually go into the profession. Now, whether it's astronomy specifically, or if that leads them into careers in software engineering or IT or mechanical engineering in a different sector than astronomy, that would be great, because it just accelerates the local people, and hopefully some of them land in astronomy as well. So
rather than monetizing the data, we're monetizing the instrumentation and some of the technology that they're developing. And the university has started a program to capture that, and hopefully even create a manufacturing program so that you can manufacture some of the mirrors and those other things here on the Hilo campus.
Just follow up. There's a slide, kind of look at it less from an astronomy perspective and more as from an authority perspective. It seems like there's an appetite in the public to really understand what the benefits are of the activities on the Mauna, who's investing in that, who's getting a benefit from it, whether it's a monetary benefit or a knowledge benefit or a job benefit and so forth, and that we should be articulating that and being transparent and trying to set up some framework where Hawaii receives its share, because even if it's there, just there, and we didn't put $1 into it, that's still an investment from Hawaii. Am I hearing that correctly? And as we look at how to create a regulatory framework, that this should be, we should consider this as part of it.
Next question is from this side.
All right, thank you. So the MKSOA's existed for over a year now, and I'm just curious, when this discussions with the community, are you as far along in sort of this process of this eventual handover from the UH that'll happen, I think, as prescribed in 2028, something like that? Are you as far along as you want to be, and if not, sort of how do you foresee the next few years going?
So when Act 255 became law, it triggered a 5-year clock, 60 months, effective July 1, 2023. So the 60-month clock expires June 30, 2028. You and I are sitting in we've got 34 months left on that clock, okay? During this transition period, the staff of 4 currently at the authority is now co-managing. We've entered a co-management formation with the existing University of Hawaii management team. What we've done is we have built in a protocol where certain projects are classified minimum impact, moderate impact, major impact. Decommissioning, for instance, would be major, right? There is a stalled vehicle up there that needs help, would fall into the minor, as an example. Anything that is moderate or major requires us to come the staff to present it to the authority, so that the authority remains engaged, and at some point a decision may be required. So this enables us to immediately get into a joint management formation as we move toward ultimately taking full authority July 1, 2028. So we got quite a bit of work. Now, I want to go back to the earlier conversation. Act 255 requires a new management plan, a new master plan, a new financial plan. So the issue about revenues, profits, cost of operations, all of that is about to go through a very diligent, intense review, because it's also going to affect what future lease agreements might look like, right? We may come up with a formula that doesn't fit for one reason or another. So we're at that early stage. Some of the advisors you met tonight are part of a planning team that we contracted within the last month that are about to embark on a 14-month intense planning effort. That planning team is led by SSFM, an international firm that has a deep portfolio here in Hawaii. Given the extent of community engagement and cultural practices and access for cultural practitioners, heavy emphasis on Hawaiian culture, SSFM wisely augmented their team by bringing in a firm some of you may be familiar with, DTL, led by Malia Kaihue. They have also subcontracted the Edith Kanakaole Foundation, led by Hui Kanahele. Also, our facilitator has a consulting firm, but my point being that the next 14 months is going to be an intense 360-degree assessment that ultimately needs to be tied back to the authority members, because the responsibility given by law on the future of the mountain rests with the authority members and the votes that will be cast going forward.
Let me just add a little specificity to answer your question, right? So for the first time in 30 years, we're tasked with standing up a new state agency. It hasn't been done in 30 years. So when we first started, we had literally a working board. We had no employees. It took us over a year to wind our way through state bureaucracy. Just to give an example, to get a job description approved for one job, we have to get approval from 3 different departments. We are hamstrung, and they get all angry at me because I keep on bringing this up. We get hamstrung by something called the Sunshine Law. The Sunshine Law says that I cannot talk to 2 authority members at the same time unless I have a duly noticed meeting. So we're trying to build this, and yet I can only talk to 1 person at a time. The only reason why we can have all of us here tonight is that this is a duly noticed meeting. But if I wanted to ask people, if I wanted to bring people that have differing opinions about something, I can't do it. So we were trying to build something, but then we're hamstrung by some of the state bureaucracy. So to answer your question, we're trying to move as fast as we can. As Executive Director DeFries said, we're going to accelerate the pace, but we're still stumbling over some of the bureaucracy and it's not any particular person's fault, but it's what's built over the state for the last 60 years, 70 years, right, in terms of the processes. So we'd like to get further ahead, but we're going to try and meet that deadline.
We got going at about 5:08, so I'm going to ask our authority members if we can extend to 7:08. Is that okay? So the community has the their full value. 7:10. Hiki no. So we have time for about 2 or 3 more questions.
I just want to know from the board how they feel they're coming in this. I said, I heard you say we're going to strive to meet the deadline, but how do you guys all feel? Like, I have like maybe 2 or 3 people I want to hear from. The youngest ones. I want to know how they're doing. How do you feel you're doing?
Well, I'm going to say for myself, my first engagement for the Mauna, I was still in my 20s. I'm going to be 40 pretty soon. How's that? But I feel it has been a big learning for me. I've gone from being an elementary school teacher here in this community and having to learn through all the movement and everything too, and engaging directly in all these different levels of government and everything all the way around. It's been an amazing learning journey. And it is something to realize that the state of Hawaii has not created an office since the 80s. And so one thing in those early days when we first getting started is the realization, like, who do we ask? Because most everyone who was involved with making the last agencies are gone. And then there's some very archaic old rules too that we hit too. There's like really pen color stops a bunch of stuff. It's like, to reimbursement for flights, you need to have the paper. It's like, who uses the paper anymore? So, there's just a lot of things like that, learning along the way, which I think is important for also the state of Hawaii. We got to kind of get with the times. But I feel confident, and it's been an honor to be able to work alongside everyone here. And I very humbly know that I'm learning this in this space as well. But I'm also I feel very hopeful. I'm actually very excited because, again, too, I remind everybody, too, this didn't come out of the goodness of the heart of the legislature. This came because the people stood up. So this is the result of something moving forward because the people had to stand. So I remind everybody who engaged in some way or form, this is the result of the community standing up and having dialogues, and then finally our legislators doing something to try and create a conversation forward. So in that, I just kind of put it out there to us all, and I try to do a lot of work to get more young people involved with this conversation, because in the end, we're the generation that has to do the work that's being decided. And with that, the imi oi kela kela, for me, running up the mauna and standing for the mauna, there's the idea of also the importance of what the mauna teaches us. And so when I think about innovation and such too, we're the endangered species capital of the world? Yes. Sciences can help us in that. You know that water hydrology and knowing the scarcity of water is a critical thing right now? Yeah, this is kind of important, that conversation. And Lucille just brought it up again too, our forests, our rivers are empty. How come? There's very real work that can be done, that needs to be done, that double edge is not only helping this mauna, but helping to, the workforce that can be created around conservation, environmental restoration, yeah, and that this mauna and all of its teachings can continue to help to feed generations, but also giving us the tools and the ability and the knowledge base to actually heal our communities in many different ways. So I'm very excited, and I encourage the community to get excited about this and continue to engage. And I encourage you, next meeting, bring somebody with you. And bring them young ones who know, like, come, bring them. Yeah.
You should have just asked me. First of all, mahalo nui to all of you for joining us tonight. As we sit here and as you ask that question, walehu lehu kamana, walehu lehu amano mano kaikena Hawaii is what comes to my mind, and that is that Hawaii is enriched with knowledge, with a knowledge base. We are exactly, in my opinion, we're exactly where we need to be, and that doesn't mean that we know exactly where we are. It just means that everyone sitting here and the other two that are not here with us tonight who work for the organization itself are doing everything possible and that they can every day, day in and day out, to be able to work on behalf of, I would say MKSOA, but more especially the mountain, and the Kaiaulu Hawaii. We all are going to have our own interpretations of what that means, because we all span a couple of generations of time as a Kaiaulu. And so we fall into and we come into conversations about honua, about aina, and about mauna, ka Hawaii, kai, from experiences that we've had. Some of them amazing and some of them not so hot, right? So for me, and it's not debatable, it's just true. We are exactly where we need to be. tonight's conversation was exciting. And thank you folks for bringing in the voice of the youth and for helping us to be very clear about the fact that they are the ones who will be inheriting the kuleana, like our kaiaulu, of this work. 5 years is the beginning. It's the training of a race. It's not the race itself. And so I leave that mana'o because of time, but I leave that. Is it perfect? No. But are we where we need to be? Yes. Because with every step that we take as a board, that our workforce takes as the workforce, and the kaiaulu takes in trying to understand, like all of you tonight and all the other communities who have come together, are working to understand, are working to help us to wordsmith our language, to be more clear in our understanding, in our articulation, we're moving forward. Mahalo.
We have time for one final question.
I think I'm going to have the last say here, Mahina, unless there's one more question. But I want to just follow up with what the two young ones have said. That's funny. Oh, 3 young. Anyway, no, absolutely right what both of them said, and I totally agree that we are where we're supposed to be. We actually, it'd be a lot easier on a lot of people if we just got some good minds together, sat and locked ourselves in a room and wrote our own plan. And we could meet all the deadlines real quick. All the deadlines that are imposed on us by legislature, by the act, by the law, and by all the pressures that are represented here in this community. We have people whose livelihoods depend on the mauna, depend on the astronomy facilities, depend on the conservation positions and jobs at the university, and a lot of people feel very uncomfortable in transition, but that's what transition is all about. But I know that this group, in all of our uniqueness, are combined and together in one point, and that is the success of the authority and the care for Mauna Kea. So when we start with that, and we're joining that with our staff and with all of the people who come on board with us, then everything else would flow. Is the kanawai, and it follows everything that Auntie Pua Kanakole talked to us about, and embedded in us, those of us who had the privilege of being around her for a long time. So is it easy? Heck no. We picked the hard road, right, Bill Stormont? We picked the hard road. But the hard road included the work with community and the work with people who don't always agree with us, but listening and understanding and listening in a good way and trying to bring all of that to the table in a positive way, so that even though we don't always agree with each other, like was said earlier, we are very comfortable to be able to speak to each other in very plain language to try and achieve that common goal. And so yeah, what a great question, and I hope that's a good answer for you. So mahalo. Wrapping it up, may I introduce Mayor Kimo Alameda.
All right, turn it off. Hey, thank you so much, everybody. Again, yes, on behalf of the county, it's a privilege and an honor. And just like Auntie said, yeah, we hopefully each of us represent you folks. And I know that's what is going to take for you guys to trust the authority. Like somebody on here gonna get your perspective. Like somebody gonna get Lani Kila's perspective. No worry. Somebody gonna get Auntie's one. Somebody gonna get Richard's. Somebody gonna get Pomai, somebody gonna get Neil's. Because then truly we reflect the community. And that's what a board should reflect. So then you guys can sit back before you guys sleep and you can be like, I don't think I even might have to respond to that because somebody gonna get my perspective on this committee. And I think that's what John Komiji said earlier, that hey, we are a very diverse board and for good reason. because whatever come out of from us is going to be pono, because we're going to debate them with love and aloha, and whatever the result, we're still going to be family. And so with that, thank you very much. Aloha.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, the last thing I'll say is that part of this transition is about recalibrating where the primary focus is. The primary focus is now on Mauna Kea. In your mind, take all the humans off. Just take all the humans off in your mind and start from there, right? What is in the best interest of Mauna Kea? What is in the best interest of the well-being and the health of Mauna Kea? And then in the planning process, as we begin to reinsert human activity, why are we doing it? What are we doing? How are we doing it? How many are going to be up there doing it, right? So all of that is now an opportunity to really go back in time so that we can go forward in time. And the guidance that we are receiving is extremely unique, intense, but this authority has the capacity to hold that center pole and keep this moving. And on one level, it feels impossible, but that's part of the attraction for us, is we know that this is an opportunity to transcend the norms. And that's where we're headed. Thank you. Mahina?
Mahalo. We want to thank again the Laupahoehoe Charter School community for welcoming us and for hosting us. We want to thank all of you for your valuable mana'o and for sharing your time with us. If you want, the meeting notes will be posted on the MKSOA website. So please go ahead and take a look at that within a few weeks or so and stay up to date. If you were unable to write in the check-in, your name and email, and you want to stay informed, please go ahead and do that. And then we have more pastries to take home. So enjoy a pastry tomorrow morning and think of us. Thanks.
Please use a blue pen.
The next meeting is September 25th, Hilo. September 24th, 5 to 7 p.m. at UH Hilo, Hale'olelo. Hale'olelo. Please let your friends and family know. And thank you to those who joined us online. They've been going in and out. And mahalo to all of the team members. Mahalo. Have a safe night.